and thank you for joining me for episode 6 of the LittleAutisticMe Podcast. My name is David, I am a late diagnosed autistic male, and today I want to talk to you about something you can do to help when preparing to request or attend an autism assessment. For me, the assessment was very stressful. It was not so much being assessed as the lead up to it. From contacting my GP to spending a year on the waiting list, the anticipation was a nightmare. I, like most people who suspect they are autistic do, spent a lot of time researching. I read everything I could find online about autism, and I watched many hours of videos on YouTube. Whilst doing this, I found the same piece of advice repeated time and time again. That was to create a document detailing stuff. Some people went into some detail about what to include, but for me that wasn't really enough information. It was helpful and I'm grateful, but it took me a while to figure out what to do. As always, I overthought it. I wanted to know what format this document should be in. Should it be freeform or report style? Did I have to include headers and footers? Should I be citing sources? What font should it be? What should the text size be? It went on until I thought just start typing, and so I did. I will go into some detail about what I included in my document, but it won't include specifics, especially where they are particularly personal. For me, I started writing this document after contacting my GP for referral. If you are thinking of seeking assessment, I would advise that you start writing it as soon as you can. During a screener call with my diagnostician, I mentioned this document and she asked me to email it to her, which I did. How they use yours may vary. Even if they didn't ask for mine, I wanted it for my own reference. I found that putting my thoughts into writing was helpful for me to remember stuff. Knowing that the assessor had a copy made me feel more comfortable. It meant that they were already aware of my many problems and could accommodate them without having to constantly ask me. So, what did I write? Well, firstly, I explained my traits as I was aware of them at the time. I talked about difficulty making eye contact, social anxiety, the need for alone time, and the difficulties I have experienced with making and maintaining friendships. I also explained that such social anxiety applied to making and receiving phone calls as well. I also talked about the need to avoid noise outdoors and how I have always listened to music whilst wearing earphones when I absolutely have to leave the house. Next, I explained my hypersensitivities to sound and smell. I explained how this had been a lifelong thing and that it caused me difficulties within the education system, as it made it pretty much impossible for me to concentrate with all the distractions. Here I included details of a hearing test that I had due to struggling to hear people talking. I explained that I now believed that this was because I struggle to hear when there are other noises or visual distractions. I also explained other difficulties I had with education, specifically lack of attendance and problems with undiagnosed dyslexia. I went on to explain how I don't like being touched and how some clothing physically hurts me. This is touch sensitivity, I guess. I spoke about things which seemed to appear to be stimming type behaviour, although at that point I never knew very much about it. Just that I fidget with certain objects in specific ways because of the feeling of them. Here I explained that I used to get in trouble at school for this. I went on to describe how socialising affects me both in the moment and the following few days. For some reason at this point and in the same paragraph I chose to detail my sleep problems and spending time alone as often as I could for all of my life. Looking back at this document, I'm starting to realise that I'm not as organised a writer as I thought I was. It's a good job that this wasn't an exam paper. If you choose to make out such a document, this should show you that it really doesn't need to be a great literary work. Do what works for you. Next up, I spoke about obsessive behaviour and other people's observations of me in regards to this. In the same section, I describe my ability to hyper-focus on things I find interesting to the exclusion of all others. I also talked of descriptions people had given of me. I had been described as heartless, uncaring and rude. I don't think I'm any of those things. I'm now noticing that I went on to reiterate how difficult I find it to focus when there are distractions. My God, I'm repetitive. But here I also mentioned the fact that my face does things which aren't appropriate to the situation, and that other people had noticed this too. I spoke of old photos of myself and how I never seemed to be smiling even though it was a happy situation. Next I spoke of something which I'd actually like feedback on. I talked of this constant internal monologue that I have. It's like a non-stop stream of thoughts. It can be about something specific or go from one thing to another and back again. Do you have this? I'm intrigued. I have heard of people not hearing their own thoughts. That sounds blissful to me. I might actually sleep if I had a quiet head. Anyway, next I spoke about difficulties I had in workplaces, school, college, university and in life itself, from not being able to understand the information people were trying to convey to me. I explained that I would do the wrong thing because I didn't understand what I was being told, or that I would take ages to figure out what I was actually supposed to be doing. Then I mentioned problems I face when my routine is changed or when plans I make don't happen as I have planned them. Again, I talked about how I hate being touched, so repetitive. Then on to more socialising issues, hatred of idle chatter, intolerant of time wasting, and some more about being obsessive, this time to do with having to plan everything before actually doing anything. Next up, some more stimming talk. More details about obsessive behaviour with a story about how a colleague noticed an obsession I had with hand washing. Then the need for things to be in the correct pockets. That is actually huge for me. My life is not a happy one if my keys are in the wrong jacket pocket. I then went on to talk about what I have found out are often referred to as special interests, a term which I don't like because it sounds like you're wrong. Next I wrote about something which I'm not going to go into any detail about. It's just about how I react to things which frustrate me. I don't really feel comfortable talking about it right now, but might in the future. After that, I mention how forgetful I am. The next few sections were talking about sleep problems, being diagnosed as suffering from depression when I was younger, which I still suffer from, stuttering, issues with food, visual sensitivities, and dyslexia again. I speak about expressions other people have used about me again. About a family member telling me I was a strange child and being called eccentric, and that time when I received a report card from a teacher who described me as erratic. Discomfort in being in other people's space was my next topic. By this I mean staying away from home for any length of time, even just overnight. I include several examples of times when this was an issue. My next topic was aphantasia, or aphantasia as I've heard it called, which at the time when I wrote the document I had only just found out about. Then I had no idea that other people could actually visualise things. This is something I cannot do. I actually plan on doing a separate episode about this, and I will go into more detail then. I described an anxiety-inducing situation which involved travel and noisy people on trains. Again, I will do a separate episode about this as there's far too much to cover on that subject in this episode. Phobias were next. I don't even want to talk about them. Even thinking of the things I fear triggers me. I finished up by talking about things which make me feel grossed out. It was just about people getting everyday stuff on their skin. I get queasy when I have anything on my skin. I don't even like touching freshly cleaned surfaces if they are still wet. And even seeing other people with dirt or anything on their skin actually makes me feel sick. So, that's a description of what was in my document. I hope it helps you with making yours if you are doing one. If not, I hope you found it interesting or entertaining or something. If you're making your own document, don't worry too much about the layout and format. I think that any information that can be provided will help the person carrying out your assessment, and I'm sure they will appreciate it. Please feel free to comment with anything you think might help anyone else. As always, thank you for listening. If you like my content, please consider making a donation at ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi.com/LittleAutisticMe, or paypal.me/LittleAutisticMe. Please also like and subscribe. The music used in this episode is by Circle Note Music, and you can find their content at circlenote.bandcamp.com. Bye.